For one thing, in China and probably India never worked off of Western models of narrative anyway. So narrative really isn't a mode of sense making. There's other modes of sense making, in places like China that are based on relations and relationality. That in some ways they seem more traditional, like teacher, student, husband, wife. But even that, a lot of that's disrupted. Although the funny thing is that when some stuff gets disrupted, other stuff recombines and almost re-traditionalizes. So even though in China, for example, Shanghai and other places seem out of control, there are things that make them much less out of control. And those are first, if you're Shanghainese, you are a Shanghai citizen. Of 20 million Shanghai people, 8 million are actual Shanghainese or 7 million with a Shanghai registration. You have welfare rights, you know who you are, you know who the others are. Big identification, much better, more than we do. Almost like an urban citizenship rather than a national citizenship. They couldn't care about other Chinese. We're Shanghainese. The hell with the rest of you. Really. So that's one thing. The second thing is with the spread of markets, you see communism, and the Cultural Revolution did a lot to destroy the family in China. For example, Bo Xilai, the guy that just got purged, who was going to be one of the top 3 in the new government. His mom, who was married to one of Mao Zedong's 7 or 8 closest colleagues, was killed by students in the Cultural Revolution. So the culture killed the teacher, killed the family, blah, blah, blah. The funny, and of course you lived in the Danwei, which was a housing unit that was was your work unit. The funny thing is with privatization and the growth of a mortgage market, you get family relations again, believe it or not. You get 3 generational families and households, and the old obligations are coming back. So there are sources of stability. Another huge source of stability, and a very positive one, that China has and India doesn't. China has and India doesn't, and that's why I'd like to refer you guys to the work of Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize winning economist, who was my old teacher from the London School of Economics many years ago, who is Indian, but he thinks China is where things are happening. India has a rights model of democracy or whatever. Sen doesn't want his notion of justice, urban justice, okay? Urban justice here should not be based, in the first instance, on a rights model, but on a capabilities model. Yeah? It's a question of what you can do. Yeah? If you're living in a slum in Dharavi, where Slumdog Millionaire was made, and you're given rights to vote, what does that mean? You hardly have a roof over your head or a toilet. People shit in the streets, they do, But if you're, and 30% illiteracy and child mortality, China, none of that stuff happens. Yeah? In China, you actually have capabilities. And Sen says this. If you go to Shanghai, first they disrupted everything with this urban local councils made all their money by selling land to property developers, right? Yeah. They sell land to property developers and they kick the working class people out who had moved to the far suburbs. But what happened after that? They built the most incredible public transport system in the world. The Shanghai Metro is the best. You've probably seen it. It's the best metro. It's longer even than London. Shanghai's #1, London 2, Beijing, Tokyo, in that order. Now, thousands of miles of track. And it takes people into work. So there's infrastructure. Yeah, there's such a strong urban infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and education infrastructure that it reunifies people, I think, and it gives a certain kind of urban stability. So don't ever underestimate the importance of infrastructure. I know in Germany there's good infrastructure, but it makes all the difference in the world in terms of disorganization, disidentification. Infrastructure is a huge thing. So I think there are sources of stability. And that's why, a lot of these mega cities are really contradictory things. They're contradictory things in terms of the highest levels of stability and also the highest levels of kind of instability. But I do think that urban justice is a hugely important question, for people to think about in any kind of course on urbanism. And the question of urban justice gets more and more complex. It's perhaps possibly that notions of justice will have to play out more on an urban level. and not on a national level, and not on the level of national government in the future. Something a bit more localist, maybe a bit more self-produced, a self-organizing, self-producing notion of justice, rather than, say, a political party from the outside that's going to come in and bring you it, like the traditional social democracy. I'm not against social democracy. And I think that that this whole notion of production of space, which I wanted to deal with, that I've been talking about, which is based on forms of life, activity, not action, that's collective, is also a mode of the production of urban justice. And maybe also a mode of the production of the political. I talked about it in the context of Occupy. You can draw on a German theorist who some of you probably have read, who is quite famous and infamous, Carl Schmitt, who I think we're allowed to read again, although he was, we know who Carl Schmitt was. But the interesting thing about Carl Schmitt, when he talks about politics the political, that's not just the law, just not the state as a collection of laws. That often outside of kind of the discursive politics of what I called action, there can be an informal, in a state of exception. Now, there are left Schmittians. I'm a little bit left Schmittian myself, not completely Schmittian, of course. But I think I think what's going on is with kind of disruptions of classical planning, and ways in which, especially the mega city, which is more out of control, itself disrupts classical discursive notions of neoliberal planning. Almost a permanent state of exception opens up, and it can be a very positive one. Because when Schmitt spoke about the state of exception, there was no fascists yet to start with. There was anarchists. Sorel was writing at the time. Not that Schmitt was ever an anarchist, and he knew about that. He knew about this populist democracy, that was going on. And I think there's spaces for this kind of stuff to happen right now. I mean, in China, just to end, if there's going to be democracy or urban democracy or anything like that in China, the Communist Party cannot last forever. Nothing lasts forever. I don't think it'll be modeled on the classic model that we have of the citizen in the West, which is based on something like civil society, Zivilgesellschaft, civil society. Hegel had another idea called Sittlichkeit, which is forms of ethical life, which is something that's much more localist, something that's less action than activity. Citizen stuff is action stuff, not activity stuff. It's something that's much more the grain of relations and relationality. Is this kind of ethical life idea of Hegel. And Chinese urban fabric is much more like ethical life than civil society. It's like, in China that comes from Taoist and Confucian historical, almost rites that then become secularized over centuries, right? And these these give almost a frame, a set of exchanges, like gift exchanges, as much as commodity exchanges. Kind of, again, forms of life again, that I think can, and I think it's from here that we're going to get perhaps some urban justice. It's from here that maybe we're going to get democracy. Less capability than rights, less action than activities. So I think that it's these kind of spaces, almost of exception, where we're going to find the political and the production of urban justice.